Hey everybody, Chris White with the American Battlefield Trust. We have Gary Edelman behind the camera who will be in front of the camera soon enough. And I'm out on one of the coolest pieces of property that I've seen in a long time. We're actually in Sharpsburg, Maryland. You may have heard of that name before because it has to do with the Battle of Sharpsburg or the Battle of Antietam, depending on what side you are on. For the north, we have Antietam. For the south, we have Sharpsburg. But today, we have one of the coolest pieces of property in the entire battlefield, if you ask me, here at the Jacob Avey farm. We're actually near the final assault for the Federals, as well as that high watermark for AP Hill's Light Division, who march up from Harper's Ferry 17 miles to help save the day. To get you quickly oriented to where we're standing, I'm actually facing out towards the west. The town or village of Sharpsburg was right over in this direction. The visitor center is just to the north of where we're standing. That is where the first opening parts of this battle will take place. Think about the cornfield, the Eastwoods, the Westwoods, coming down the Hagerstown Turnpike. So that's where we'll have those opening actions, which will eventually kind of go off into this direction, where we'll have more of the battle start to erupt at a place called the Sunken Road or the Bloody Lane. You might know of that from the Irish Brigade fighting there, or maybe John Brown Gordon being wounded multiple times. Then, of course, we have behind me, off in this direction, the Rohrbach Bridge. You probably know it as the Burnside Bridge. There are three bridges here crossing the Antietam Creek, which is just off in that direction across some very rolling terrain, very cool terrain if you ever get a chance to hike out there. And out in that direction is where Ambrose Burnside, his 9th Army Corps, will cross that bridge after fighting throughout the morning and early afternoon. They will deploy into open fields behind us and start marching towards where we're standing. So what we have here is a great arc around us. We have the National Cemetery, Antietam National Cemetery, off in that direction. In the afternoon of September 17th, 1862, we're going to reach the crescendo of action here out near the Jacob Avey farm. What we have is the 9th Army Corps, the Federal 9th Army Corps, come across the Antietam Creek, and they will take a long time to put together a battle line. Then they're going to start pushing towards the spires of Sharpsburg, which are just behind us, the town itself. What's beyond that? The Potomac River. And that is going to be up against the back of Robert E. Lee and his Confederate forces. If we're the Confederates are trying to block that access towards the Potomac River, and specifically the river fords that are going to be our escape route back into Virginia. Remember, it's not West Virginia yet. For the Federals, we're going to try to land that killing blow. In the meantime, up in this area, we have David Rump Jones's division of Confederates. They have been fighting down along that Burnside Bridge. They've fallen back to this area, and we'll have some of the names that you may know, like James Kemper's brigade, that Virginia brigade who go into Pickett's charge, and Kemper is wounded in the groin, survives the battle of Gettysburg, played by Royce Applegate in the movie, and then he will go on to actually survive the war, fight at Cold Harbor, and become the Virginia governor. We'll also have Thomas Drayton's South Carolina Brigade come up into this area. Drayton is not the favorite of Robert E. Lee, and in fact, this is the last battle he will fight with the Army of Northern Virginia, but Drayton's men will come up here in support of some Confederate guns. One of them is Wise's artillery from Virginia, commanded by James Brown. No, not that James Brown, another James Brown who's wounded near this area. And then we'll have over off in this direction, Hugh Garden's battery. Together we have at least 10 guns between these two batteries. They're going to be firing off towards the 9th Army Corps. That 9th Army Corps will be coming up here. Some of them will be part of Isaac Peace Rodman's division. Rodman is one of 6 generals throughout this campaign to be killed or mortally wounded. We have them go through the phases of the action, and in fact, he has a mortuary cannon not too far from here, and behind me is actually a monument that looks like the Washington Monument to the 9th New York Zouaves. Those are Hawkins Zouaves, led by Colonel Rush Hawkins coming up here. They're going to be dressed in light blue short coats. They'll have a little bit of baggy pants on like MC Hammer had back in the 90s. Fezzes coming up here, and they're going for broke towards Sharpsburg. But as Rodman comes up onto the battlefield, probably about 400 yards from where we're standing, he will be mortally wounded in the action here. So as they come up into this area, we have Federals pushing. We have more Federals coming up in this direction. We have Harrison Fairchild's brigade coming off in this direction. We also have Thomas Welsh's brigade. They'll be coming up into this area, and then we'll have Benjamin Christ's brigade, or Chris brigade, I should say, coming up as well. So we have a lot of Yankees coming up in this direction. And what we'll see is some veteran units of the 9th Army Corps who fought at places along the North Carolina coast and at 2nd Bull Run, but we'll also have some newbies like the 8th Connecticut Infantry coming up onto line in their first battle thrown into this action just a few weeks after they had enlisted. And now we have A.P. Hill and his light division who have been marching 17 miles, who will arrive up the Harpers Ferry Road, cross at Boatler's Ford over at the Shepherdstown area where you helped us preserve land recently, and he will come marching hell for leather up into this area, and his men, including Maxie Gregg's brigade, Lawrence O'Brien Branch's brigade, James Archer's brigade, they will start to come online and stem that 9th Corps tide, pushing back that final assault, as we would call it here at Antietam, by Ambrose Burnside and his portion of the Union Army of the Potomac. But we have an opportunity to preserve 20 acres here, right at the edge of the battlefield. This is, you can barely get closer. I mean, this is some of the land that we're trying to preserve out here. You're seeing monuments, the 8th Connecticut monuments out there, Isaac Peace Rodman's upturned cannons out there. You also have the 9th New York monument out there, the big obelisk. So we are right at the edge of the battlefield. But remember, this is also battlefield. Just because there's monuments out there, and just because there's a National Park Service boundary, doesn't mean that there wasn't fighting elsewhere. And that's why we're out here trying to preserve this piece of land. Now, this farm at the time of the war was 500 acres. Over time, it had been, as we would call it today, subdivided, chopped down, chopped down, chopped down. And today we have 20 acres, we have a historic home out here, and we have the opportunity to save really the first piece of land on the final assault portion of the battlefield at Antietam that the American Battlefield Trust has had.
This is the first time I've ever stood on this part of the battlefield, and as Chris says, this is battlefield right here, and I'm awash. I have views I've never had before, and so can members of the public, or if we're able to preserve this land. Let me back up a little bit. Chris already oriented you to what we're looking at, and standing here for the first time, I'm shocked by the undulations of the ground. You can see some real deal high ground over there, and so since we're talking about Garden's battery, some of Riley's guns, and Brown's guns, you're talking about that ledge being important. Behind the camera over here, if I may, you're seeing some outbuildings here too. You can see another ledge, and indeed we have these guns repositioning throughout the battle as the circumstances dictate. This must have been intense, and this is the type of fighting, and I think it was on this side of the field where one of the soldiers said that for a time the landscape had turned slightly red. We are on these 20 acres, and I want to stress something. When you look off in that direction, you kind of see a clearing. This tract includes everything to the edge of the woods you can see in the distance, if you could picture where that is. And only about 40 yards past that is National Park Service property, where you have the 9th New York Monument and the Isaac Peace Rodman mortuary cannon there. There is a 40-yard distance that I'm not saying the park can acquire this land, or if they can make a trail here, or if they're able to get access across those 40 yards or so. But if they could, we could finally have in Antietam a loop of more than 20 miles that goes all the way through the town, around to the southern attack, where the park has done such a great job creating trails for everybody to use that can then connect with the middle bridge, and then all the way over to the sunken road and elsewhere on to the famous parts of the battlefield at the cornfield and the epicenter and all those other places. So this would just be a big win for us. We know we ask you a lot, but we hope you can get involved. We hope you'll share this with your friends, and whether or not you can't, thank you so much for your support of battlefield preservation and education.